So just being able to have those fundamental communications, to me, is step one. We need to make sure that we're meeting those needs before we can get to the learning.
Hello there, my name is Monica Burns, and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with Pocketalk. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. So don't forget to head to my website, classtechtips.com/podcast, for all of the links and resources from today's episode. This episode is sponsored by Pocketalk, the award-winning global leader in language translation solutions. Pocketalk provides real-time, accurate translations in over 84 languages, empowering educators and students to communicate instantly. Pocketalk offers both handheld devices and powerful administrative tools with a commitment to security, accuracy, and ease of use. Trusted by over 500 school districts, Pocketalk helps all members of school communicate with their multilingual learners and families. To find out how Pocketalk can be used at your school, visit pocketalk.com. That's POCKETALK.com. Today's episode is titled Navigating Language Barriers in Multilingual Classrooms, a bonus episode with Pocketalk, and it was wonderful to chat with Arturo Guajardo today. Arturo is the Director of K-12 Partnerships at Pocketalk and has spent time working with students in classroom settings. I asked Arturo all about multilingual classrooms and how to make sure every student has what they need during the school day. Let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you about navigating language barriers in multilingual classrooms. And before we dive into all of that, would love for you to share a bit with listeners. What is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate your time today, and it's wonderful to be here. Like I said, it's an honor. My name is Arturo Guajardo. I am the Director of K-12 Partnerships for Pocketalk. My background in education, I think, is at about 32 years now. So I've been around the block a few times. You know, I started as a bilingual teacher back in the 90s in Austin, Texas. I was in the classroom for 10 years, working mostly with fifth grade, some fourth, some third. Taught all subject areas there. Towards the end, I did focus in more on technology and science. So that sort of took me into the EdTech world a little bit more, where I did get my master's in EdTech and moved up to the district level. So I was a sort of an EdTech coach back at that time. So I did that for another 8 years or so. And then I went into the EdTech world, worked at BrainPop for more than a decade and Osmo, and now I'm here at Pocketalk, where my day-to-day is exciting because I still get to work with educators and trying to break down language barriers for students. So that sort of, it's great for me because it kind of puts together my EdTech side, my nerdy EdTech side as an educator, but also it takes me back to the 90s as a bilingual educator working with multilingual students. And so it kind of brings those two worlds together for me. So it's a lot of fun, and I love my work. I feel very like I still have my purpose when I do my job every day.
Well, I'm excited to hear your perspective, right, for this conversation, given your classroom experience. I taught fifth grade for a while as well, and a favorite being with that, fun age level of students. But then, of course, your role now where you're supporting educators in so many different roles. And, today we're talking about multilingual classrooms. And for a listener who hasn't heard that term, or maybe has heard the term and isn't quite exactly sure what it encompasses, can you describe what a multilingual classroom might look like?
Sure. And I will say this, if you ask 10 multilingual educators, they'll probably give you 10 different answers. So I'll probably give you my perspective more than anything. But for the most part, what you'll see in a multilingual classroom is just what the title says. You're going to see multiple languages perhaps multiple languages on the student side, where the students are coming with their home language and using that in the classroom, and then at the same time also transitioning, or not necessarily transitioning, but just learning more English as we go along. You'll have educators doing the same sort of thing, where they may be working for part of the day in one language and then part of the day in another language, and or maybe multiple times a day that switching might be going on. So there's so many varieties of models today that are being used across the country. But for the most part, think of it in terms of a place where a student and a teacher are using their languages, both home language and English language, in ways to learn, in ways to communicate, in different ways to socialize. To me, that kind of environment where if you can set it up right, it can be very powerful in the sense that students feel that their home language is an asset, that their home language is something that they can use to learn, and not necessarily something that has to be forgotten. Because in the past, in schools here in the United States, we've done that, where we've told kids, your home language stays at home, don't bring it here. And to me, a multilingual classroom encourages that home language and uses that home language and builds up that home language, while at the same time building up that English.
I love that emphasis on seeing the home language as an asset, right? And just that description that it may be students who are speaking multiple languages, but also teachers, right? Or who's leading that group or pushing into that group that may also kind of embrace that one part of their day may feel this way, another part of their day may feel a different way. So, it's not just one group, it's kind of everyone who's really embracing that multilingual experience. But you mentioned already, Arturo, that in certain, when this works, right? Or certain classrooms where this is, there's so much intention and decisions, right, that are being made to make this happen. So what are some of the biggest challenges that educators face when teaching in a multilingual classroom?
Sure. Well, I think mostly what I tend to think about when I think of challenges, I sort of think about those newcomer students that are new to not just new to your classroom, not just new to your school, not just new to your city. They're new to the country, and they're new to the language, and many are coming from places where they've seen conflict, and they've experienced a lot sometimes as they're coming to the United States, and they have this background of not necessarily a positive one, and here they are dropped into this new place where they don't speak the language, and in some cases where there is nobody in the school that speaks their language, and that can be a pretty traumatic experience for a lot of young kids and kids in general, and people in general. I should say that it's not just kids at this point, but what I'm hoping to do is help create spaces where students and families feel welcome, and where language sort of is no longer an issue, and where we're using our technologies to help bridge those divides that can happen right off the bat. I think for educators, these sort of experiences are common now for many of us, and in particular, even me I'm a Spanish speaker. I spoke Spanish first before I learned English, and I was a bilingual educator, so I was using Spanish and English all the time. But when at one point I did have a newcomer come in whose family was from Pakistan. So at that point I realized, okay, I had always had no issues with speaking English and Spanish with my students, but now I have a student and I have families that I can't really communicate with. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that, wow, this is the experience that many teachers have, and those challenges can be difficult. So I'm happy that here at Pocketalk we're able to help bridge those gaps and to help overcome those challenges.
Yeah, and I'd love to unpack some of those classroom strategies, right, for really addressing these challenges. What are some effective classroom strategies educators could use to support students who speak multiple languages, who may speak a language they don't speak, like that example you just gave?
Yeah, so there's tons of technologies out there that can help. I mean, I think we all know about Google Translate and other Microsoft has their technologies as well, and that can be used daily to help bridge those communication gaps. And one thing that I tend to think about a lot is sort of when I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and those sort of those basic needs, those psychological and safety needs that all of us have that need to be met first. So when you think about those students who are newcomers, they don't know routines for the schools, they don't understand the rules, and they don't know how to go through the cafeteria line. They may not even know how to ask to go to the restroom. And they're coming in and we're sort of expecting them to right away, okay, start learning. And so there's a lot of needs, I think, that fundamentally have to be met before you can start the learning. So to me, communication is key there. We have to make sure students understand those routines and understand how schools work and understand how learning works. And even fundamentally understanding how things like our safety drills, our fire drills work. Because again, there's many students who are arriving here from war-torn areas. And if they hear that fire drill alarm go off, boy, that can be, again, trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma at that point. So just being able to have those fundamental communications, to me, is step one. We need to make sure that we're meeting those needs before we can get to the learning. Beyond that, families, I think, are hugely important, especially for newcomers. Sometimes the only people that they can communicate with are their direct families. So getting families involved in the schools, again, is hugely important. But how do you do that? How do you communicate with families when maybe they don't speak English either, or maybe you don't have staff that speak their language? So meeting those needs of the families, getting them involved, making sure that they're comfortable coming into the schools is hugely important as well. And then at that point, again, we can get to the learning, we can get to the communicating, to the academic language that needs to be built. But let's focus in on those fundamental needs first, then we can get to the learning.
Yeah, those fundamentals, right? Building that foundation, right, for that student, for that group, for their family, right, is so important because nothing can happen if you don't have something to build, right, off of. So I love that emphasis on building the foundation. And, once teachers are maybe working with a group, maybe we're, at this kind of halfway-ish, second half of the school year, how can teachers ensure that multilingual students feel included, feel engaged, even if they're still developing their English language proficiency?
Sure. Well, lots of different strategies. But again, what we can do here with our technologies at Pocketalk that I think can help here is, again, giving the students a voice, making sure that they can be heard, making sure that students have the ability or the opportunity to show you what they know. Because many students do come into your classrooms and they have a background knowledge that's incredibly rich, and in some cases even broader than many of the students that have spent their entire time in U.S. classrooms. So having the opportunity to have them communicate with you is huge. And sometimes right off the bat, that may not be possible unless you have technologies like Pocketalk, where you can have the students speak into the device and in their home language, and then have their knowledge, their understanding, their learning, think about any fundamental academic practice that we use. Like I always think about turn and talk.
Yeah.
And how do you do turn and talk when one student speaks English and the other students doesn't? So just having the ability to have them be able to communicate with the class, with the teacher, with other staff at school is huge, and again can make a big difference academically, I think.
And I think most teachers, at all different grade levels can envision, right, that turn and talk experience, right, where students are interacting, right, with that partner, with the person across the table from them or who's next to them. And so, you gave such a great example already of, what, might happen in these situations. But what role does a tool like Pocketalk play in a multilingual classroom? How can educators incorporate it into their teaching practice?
Yeah, well, let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of give you a quick example of how it works. So
Please.
I think a lot of times all I have to do is show you how it works, and then the light bulbs start to I've seen it so many times in presentations where people are like,
right.
And then another one goes, I know, it's something else. So it's really simple to use. Essentially, you pick the two languages that you want to work with. In this case, I've selected Spanish and English. once those are in place, I have to pay attention to this arrow that's in the middle. So in this case, I'd be speaking Spanish and it would translate over to English. And then if I reverse it, it's now English to Spanish. There's one button on the device that I have to press and hold. So I press and hold the button, start talking, the device starts listening, starts translating for me automatically. So there's what I just said, and you'll hear it.
Presionado el botón. Empiezo a hablar. El dispositivo comienza a escuchar y comienza a traducir automáticamente.
So there, it did the translation already, and I will say that as a Spanish speaker,
right,
perfectly translated. And then as a student, let's say I'm the student who speaks Spanish, I can now flip that little arrow. Hablo en español y me traduce a inglés.
I speak Spanish and it translates into English.
So I can see the translation on the screen and I can read it as well. So for a student to just be able to speak into the device and be able to be heard, essentially, is again, just one of those fundamental pieces of what we do in the classroom that can now be done in 84 languages.
And that's just so simple and powerful, right? Could totally transform the turn and talk experience. Like you said, a teacher trying to explain something clearly to a student, right? Or a student who needs help with the routines, like you mentioned, like not sure how to get from one place to another, and it brings me to this next question I wanted to ask you too, on how can this technology support both students and their families, right? In navigating language barriers at school?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it goes back to the idea of just how we involve our families in learning and in the school experience and how important that is. So for Pocketalk, a device like Pocketalk, at the very least, I always recommend that you have one up at the front office, for the front office to be able to welcome a family when they first come to school. That first experience for a family at school, it's like, you only get a chance to make the first impression. Well, as a school community, we get one chance to make a first impression on families. So we have to make sure that one's a good one. And so if a family comes in and you can now communicate with them, very much likely that they will come back.
Yeah.
Because if you can't communicate with them, on the other hand, it's very unlikely that they'll come back as well. So you really have to make sure that first communication is good and positive, and then that'll bring the family back into the schools. And then after that, think in terms of just getting involved with the school community and feeling like that they are welcomed in the school, because we know that when parents feel welcomed in the school, then that tends to bleed over into the student, and the student feels welcome in the school and feels like they are in a safe place where they can learn, and so that relationship with the parent is huge. And think about your PTA meetings, think about your parent-teacher conferences, think about your IEP meetings or your meetings where you have a longer form meeting where you do have to explain things and really discuss things with parents. And so this device can make a huge difference in so many settings, and just every setting where a parent is on campus or where you're doing a home visit, that can make a huge difference for the relationship that you have with the families.
I love those examples because you're so right. That first impression when someone walks into a space, how could it not be intimidating, right? It's a new space that you're walking into, and having that positive experience, not just understanding, right, the communication of it all, but also, that just shows the value, right, that a school or district puts on those moments, right? It's a signal, right, that you are important to us. We want to make sure you have a positive experience here, and then we can get right to the details, right? Or then we can get to what the actual information that we're communicating is. It does so much, right, in that whole process of welcoming and informing, right, someone when they come into any meeting, right, that might happen in a school. And particularly, we've all been there, right, in our different roles that we inhabit in our lives, right? That can be an intimidating experience, whether you are speaking the language proficiently, right, that's being spoken in that building or not. So I love those examples, and I love the ease of use that someone in the front office staff could just pick this up and go, right, without needing some other level of onboarding, right, to make it happen. So, as we're talking today, right, of course, I'm going to link out to oodles of resources for people to not just connect with you, but to learn more, right, about Pocketalk. But for someone who's on the move and maybe making some mental bookmarks, right, of this information, or can't wait to go tell a colleague, right, about what they've heard in our conversation today, where can people go to learn more about Pocketalk if they're curious on what this might look like in their learning environments?
Absolutely. So I always recommend you start on our website at pocketalk.com. We have a section there for education. We work with various organizations in healthcare and city and state government and some various places, but we know education is hugely important. We truly believe that. So we have some resources on our website that may be useful to use at pocketalk.com. And Pocketalk is spelled with one T, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, if you need more information, if you want me to send out a planning guide or anything else, or jump on a call, I'd be happy to do that. You can reach out to me directly, and just through email is fine. Arturo at pocketalk.com. So that's ARTURO at Pocketalk with one T, pocketalk.com.
Wonderful. Well, Arturo, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing these great strategies and information with listeners.
Thank you, Monica. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here today.
It was so much fun chatting with Arturo today, and let's finish up like we always do with a few key points from the episode to make this EdTech easy. Multilingual classrooms embrace multiple languages, both from students and teachers. A student's home language is an asset that should be valued and integrated into the learning experience. Educators need strategies to support multilingual students, from establishing clear routines to using technology for communication. Translation tools like Pocketalk can help bridge communication gaps between educators, students, and families. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode at classtechtips.com/podcast, including all of the ways to connect with the team at Pocketalk. Thank you to Pocketalk for sponsoring this episode. Pocketalk is the trusted solution for more than 500 school districts as the only translation technology with third-party security certification and a centralized admin panel to help schools communicate with all students and families. Visit pocketalk.com to learn more about how Pocketalk could benefit your classroom. That's POCKETALK.com. So just one T in the middle of Pocketalk. If you're listening to today's episode on Apple Podcast or Spotify or maybe another favorite app, don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically so you don't miss a thing. And podcasts like this one are totally free. So it's a great way to get an instant reminder if there is a new episode. And of course, if you got an extra moment today and want to help out a bit, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps other educators who are searching for content related to education technology find a podcast like this one. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday for another new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast.